People think betrayal announces itself. Raised voices, slamming doors, a text message found at midnight. Mine arrived standing up, smiling, and holding a champagne flute, while 30 people waited politely for a toast. If I hadn't noticed the weight of the envelope in his other hand, the faint tremor he tried to control with a practiced grin, I might have missed the moment my life tilted. That's the trick with public humiliation. It disguises itself as celebration until it's already happened. My husband Daniel had chosen the restaurant carefully, white tablecloths, soft lighting, the kind of place where anniversaries mattered and waiters remembered your name. Our families filled the long table, my parents, his parents, a few close friends, co-workers from his company. Everyone was relaxed, warm, already halfway through their second glass of wine. Laughter bounced off the walls. I remember thinking, briefly, that this was the reward for being steady all these years, for showing up, for carrying weight without complaint. My name is Laura Bennett. I was 41 that night, vice president at a regional healthcare firm, financially stable, socially visible, and, according to my family, the strong one, the reliable one, the sister who handled things. Daniel liked that about me, or said he did. People often assumed he was the ambitious one because he owned a business, but the truth was quieter. My income paid our mortgage, floated his startup through its first 3 years, and kept our life smooth enough that no one ever worried about us, including me. 7 years of marriage teaches you patterns. And Daniel always touched my lower back when he stood up from the table. He always cleared his throat before speaking to a group. He always joked first, then turned sincere. So when he pushed his chair back and raised his glass, I smiled automatically. I even squeezed his hand. Someone clinked a fork against a plate. The room hushed. He looked around, letting the silence stretch just long enough to feel important. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he said, voice calm, trained. 7 years is a long time. Long enough to know when something has run its course. A few people chuckled, assuming a joke. I felt a flicker of confusion, nothing more. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. I expected a folded note, maybe a sentimental line he didn't trust himself to remember. Instead, he placed a thick envelope gently on the table in front of me, aligning it with my plate like a place card. "Laura," he continued, still smiling, "you deserve honesty." The word honesty echoed in my ears as I opened the envelope. Legal letterhead. My name typed cleanly at the top, petition for dissolution of marriage. For a moment my brain refused to translate it. I read the first line twice, then a third time. Across from me my mother's smile froze. Someone whispered my name. Daniel took a slow sip of champagne. "I've already filed," he said, as if explaining a change in dinner plans. "I didn't want to drag this out. I'm moving on." The room fractured into sound. Chair scraping, my father is half standing, Daniel's mother gasping, hand to her mouth. I didn't look at any of them. I looked at Daniel, in searching for the smallest crack, nerves, regret, anything human. There was none, just relief. The kind that comes from executing something you've rehearsed. "You're doing this here?" I asked. My voice surprised me, steady, almost polite. "I thought it was better this way," he replied. "Transparent, clean, clean." At the far end of the table, my younger sister Emily sat very still, 36, recently divorced. She had moved closer after her split, started showing up to family dinners again, to our house on Sundays. She didn't speak, didn't reach for me. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second before dropping to her napkin. Not a shock, not confusion, control. "I'll have my attorney reach out tomorrow," Daniel said, already easing back into his chair. "I want this to be amicable." I nodded once. That seemed to satisfy him. Around us, and people spoke in low, frantic bursts. My mother asked if I was okay. My father told Daniel this wasn't the time or place. Someone suggested we leave. Daniel only shrugged, as if the discomfort in the room belonged to everyone else. Dinner ended early. Plates untouched. Apologies mumbled. Daniel left separately, saying he had somewhere to be. Emily hugged me lightly, her arms stiff, her perfume unfamiliar. "I'm so sorry," she whispered too quickly. "Call me later." She didn't wait for an answer. I drove home alone. The house was dark when I arrived, his things already gone from the entryway. Closet empty on one side, the bathroom cleared with efficiency that spoke of preparation. On the kitchen counter sat a single sheet of paper, a note telling me he'd be staying elsewhere and that we could talk logistics soon. No anger, no explanation. Just logistics. I slept for less than an hour. Around 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed. A message from a friend who hadn't attended the dinner. "Is it true?" Before I could respond, another notification appeared. This one from Emily. It wasn't meant for me. A photo loaded slowly on the screen, then sharpened into focus. Daniel's arm, a familiar watch, Emily's hand on his chest, a caption beneath it. Unfinished, still in draft mode. Finally, no more pretending. I sat on the edge of the bed, the house silent around me, and understood something with absolute clarity. The divorce hadn't been the ending. It was the introduction. People reveal their priorities immediately after they think they've won. Daniel's was speed. By sunrise, my phone was already buzzing, not with apologies, not with explanations, but with logistics. A text asking when I'd be available to discuss timelines. Another reminding me that dragging things out only hurts everyone. It was framed as concern. It always is. Urgency is the favorite disguise of someone trying to outrun consequences. By mid-morning, the family group chat was alive. Careful language, soft edges. Let's all stay calm. This doesn't have to be ugly. My mother called twice before I answered. She told me she loved me, then gently suggested that public scenes never help women like me. Women with reputations, with careers. "You're strong," she said, as if strength meant silence. I agreed with her out loud. Then I did something quietly radical. I stopped responding. When you stop reacting, patterns emerge. Daniel had always relied on my predictability, my instinct to resolve, to smooth, to negotiate. Without that, he overplayed his hand. He sent a draft settlement proposal within 48 hours. Too fast. Almost eager. It offered me fair compensation in exchange for waiving further claims. I didn't read it closely yet. Instead, I logged into our joint accounts for the first time since the dinner. The balances were wrong. Not dramatically, no cartoonish emptying of accounts, but wrong enough to raise the hair on my arms. Transfers I didn't recognize. Withdrawals labelled as operating expenses. Our savings account had been reduced in clean, even increments, like someone shaving weight off a scale. It wasn't panic money. It was planned money. I took screenshots. Then I downloaded statements. Then I checked again, slower this time. Daniel's company portal was still accessible under my credentials. He'd never bothered changing them. Why would he? I'd handled payroll when he travelled. I'd approved reimbursements during tax season. I scrolled through vendor lists, expense reports, and consultant payments. That's when I saw her name, Emily Carter, listed as an independent consultant paid monthly. The amounts weren't huge. That was the point. Consistency without visibility. I leaned back in my chair and let the implications settle. Emily called that afternoon. Her tone was warm, almost relieved. She asked how I was holding up, told me she hated that I was hurting. I listened, said little. Then she mentioned, casually, that she'd started doing some work for Daniel a while back. Just helping him organize things. Strategy. Messaging. I needed the income, she said, and he needed someone he could trust. The sentence hung between us, complete and damning. That night, I found the prenup amendment. It had been uploaded to our shared legal folder 6 months earlier, time-stamped on an ordinary Tuesday. I remembered the original prenup clearly, signed before our wedding, reviewed carefully, boring in the way responsible documents are boring. This amendment was different, narrower, sharper. It adjusted asset classifications, shifted ownership language, Triggered consequences after the 7th anniversary. Our 7th anniversary. I stared at my digital signature at the bottom of the page and felt something cold settle in my chest. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask Emily what she meant by trust. Instead, I opened a notebook and wrote down dates. Emily's increased presence, Daniel's late nights, the sudden push to refinance the house. The way he'd insisted we celebrate our anniversary publicly this year instead of quietly like we usually did. A pattern took shape, not emotional, not dramatic, mechanical. Like watching gears align after you realize a machine exists. A week later, I overheard the call by accident. Daniel had stopped by the house to pick up winter coats he claimed he'd forgotten. I stayed in the kitchen while he took the call in the hallway, assuming I couldn't hear him. He was wrong. His voice dropped into something playful, conspiratorial. "We're ahead of schedule," he said. A pause, then laughter. "Yeah. She doesn't even know what she's signed." Another pause. "Early win." That night, Emily posted a photo. New shoes, expensive ones, captioned with a joke about fresh starts. The comments filled quickly, friends congratulating her resilience, her glow. I recognized the restaurant in the background, Daniel's favourite, the one he'd taken me to after closing his first big contract. I didn't scroll further. I saved the image instead, noting the date, the time, the location tag she'd forgotten to disable. Daniel's attorney followed up the next morning, polite but firm. They wanted to finalise quickly. Avoid unnecessary scrutiny. Avoid court, if possible. Given the circumstances, the email read, a discreet resolution benefits everyone. I smiled at that line. Discretion only benefits the person with something to hide. I replied with a single sentence. I'm reviewing the documents. Behind the scenes, I started assembling something else. I requested full account histories. I backed up emails. I exported metadata. I booked a consultation with a forensic accountant recommended by a colleague who specialised in corporate disputes. I paid her retainer without hesitation. When she asked what I suspected, I didn't dramatise. I told her I believed marital assets had been repositioned with third-party assistance. She didn't blink. She just asked for access. Emily invited me to coffee. I declined. She texted that she missed me, that families survive worse things than this, that she hoped I wasn't letting bitterness cloud my judgment. I read the message twice, then archived it. There would be time later for bitterness, if I needed it. For now, clarity mattered more. Precision mattered more. Silence mattered most of all. By the end of the month, Daniel had moved fully out. Emily had moved in with him. The family adjusted with surprising speed. They told themselves a story where this was unfortunate but inevitable, where I would recover because I always did. No one asked why the timeline felt rushed. No one asked why my sister looked so comfortable spending money she hadn't earned a year earlier. That kind of curiosity is inconvenient. I let them believe the version that made them comfortable. I attended nothing. I argued with no one. I signed nothing. And as the paper trail grew heavier, as the pattern hardened into proof, one thought stayed with me, calm and unyielding. They weren't just leaving me. They were taking something. And they were counting on me not noticing until it was too late. Anger is loud. Proof is quiet. I chose quiet because it lasts longer. By the time most people confront betrayal, they're already behind it, reacting to what's visible, are arguing over feelings that evaporate the moment money moves. I wasn't interested in how Daniel felt or what Emily justified to herself. I wanted timestamps. I wanted origin points. I wanted a story that could survive cross-examination without my voice ever rising above a whisper. The forensic accountant, Marlene, worked the way surgeons do, methodical, unemotional, unimpressed by drama. She asked for everything: personal accounts, business ledgers, loan documents, email access, cloud storage. If it's clean, she told me, it'll look boring. If it's not, it'll look intentional. Within a week, she had color-coded charts that told a story no family meeting ever could. Money had been moving long before the anniversary dinner, not in panic, in preparation. The affair timeline emerged almost accidentally. More expense reports from business travel that overlapped with Emily's location tags. Hotel invoices billed under client meetings on weekends. She'd posted photos from the same city. It wasn't romantic. It was logistical. They coordinated calendars like colleagues, not lovers. Months earlier than I'd assumed. Long enough to plan, long enough to rehearse, long enough to decide I was a variable, not a person. The emails were worse, not because they were graphic, they weren't, but because of their tone. Strategic, detached. Daniel wrote about me the way executives write about obstacles. She'll want to negotiate. She hates conflict. If we move fast, she won't dig. Emily replied with suggestions, language tweaks, timing advice. She reminded him of the prenup trigger date. She suggested the anniversary dinner as a controlled environment. Reading it felt less like heartbreak and more like realizing you'd been audited without consent. The forged prenup amendment was the centerpiece. A digital signature expert confirmed what my body had already known the moment I saw it. It was technically mine, procedurally impossible, and temporally wrong. The metadata showed it had been uploaded from Daniel's office IP while I was on a recorded conference call across town. My signature had been lifted from a prior document, resized, and dropped in with amateur precision. Sloppy enough to miss if you weren't looking, obvious once you were. The bank transfers followed a similar logic. Funds routed through Daniel's company as consulting fees, then distributed to Emily in amounts just under reporting thresholds. An asset repositioning disguised as operational expense. Marlene highlighted a cluster of transactions and slid the paper across the table. This, she said, is what concealment looks like when the people doing it think they're smarter than the system. I felt something like relief. Systems don't care who you cry to. The recorded call came last. I hadn't planned it. Emily had called while I was driving, careless, buoyant. I answered without thinking and put the phone on speaker, the car's system automatically recording for hands-free use. She talked too much. About how fast everything had gone. About how Daniel was nervous but excited. About how, once it's final, none of this matters. When she laughed and said, "We really did pull it off early. I nearly missed the significance because it sounded so casual." My attorney listened to everything in silence. Then she looked at me and nodded once. "This isn't just infidelity," she said. "This is collusion, fraud, conspiracy to deprive you of marital assets." She explained the difference carefully, like she was outlining weather patterns instead of consequences, civil penalties, asset clawbacks, referrals. I didn't interrupt. I didn't ask how much it would hurt them. I asked how long it would take. The answer depended on one thing: patience. If I moved now, if I confronted, accused, exposed, they'd retreat. Undo mistakes, claim confusion. If I waited, they'd commit. Marriage, cohabitation, public declarations that tied them legally and financially together. "Let them finish," my attorney said almost kindly. People are most honest when they think the ending is secure. I understood then that silence wasn't passive. It was strategic. So I said nothing. When Daniel emailed updates about settlement timelines, I replied with neutral acknowledgements. When Emily sent photos from their weekend trips, I reacted with a single heart. I attended no family discussions. I corrected no narratives. I let them believe I was tired, overwhelmed, resigned. I let them believe the expedited divorce was working. Confidence makes people careless. Carelessness leaves fingerprints. They eloped 2 months later. A small ceremony. Smiling faces. A clean story about love finding its way. The family attended. They toasted resilience. Someone mentioned how well Emily was doing now. Daniel looked relaxed for the first time in years. I watched the photos roll in from a distance, noting dates, locations, witnesses. Marriage certificates are wonderfully specific. They tie timelines into knots no one bothers untying until it's too late. The final settlement hearing was scheduled for the following month. Routine. Uncontested, as far as they knew. Daniel bragged to a mutual friend about how smoothly it was going, about how amicable I'd been, about how lucky he was that I didn't want to fight. I smiled when I heard that. Luck had nothing to do with it. By the time I walked into the courthouse, I wasn't carrying anger. I was carrying folders, indexed, labelled, cross-referenced. I didn't look for Daniel or Emily in the hallway. I didn't need to. Everything that mattered was already on record, waiting its turn to be introduced. I took my seat, folded my hands. None thought one last, steady thought before the judge entered the room. I wasn't there to stop their marriage. I was there to show them what it had cost. People imagine justice as loud, raised voices, objections, a dramatic confession that cracks everything open. In reality, justice is administrative. It arrives in binders, exhibits, and a judge who has already read more than you think. When I walked into that courtroom, Daniel smiled at me with the relaxed confidence of someone who believed the story was over. He thought this was paperwork. He didn't realize it was an autopsy. They sat together at the opposite table, husband and wife now, legally aligned, shoulders angled toward each other, like a unit. Emily wore a cream-coloured dress that suggested innocence without saying it outright. Daniel's suit was new. His attorney leaned in. And whispering reassurances. The body language told a clear story, clean exit, minimal damage, future intact. I took my seat beside my attorney and said nothing. Silence is unnerving only when people start to notice it. The hearing began exactly as expected. Procedural language. Dates entered into the record. Daniel's attorney spoke first, framing the divorce as unfortunate but amicable, emphasizing cooperation, speed, and finality. He praised my grace under difficult circumstances. The judge nodded politely, flipping through pages. Emily squeezed Daniel's hand when the word final was used. I watched the judge's pen pause for half a second longer than necessary. Then it was my attorney's turn. She didn't stand immediately. She waited, letting the quiet stretch just enough to shift the room's temperature. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost conversational. "Your Honour," she said, "before we proceed to settlement, we have preliminary matters regarding asset classification and disclosure." Daniel's smile flickered, just briefly. Like a light responding to a power fluctuation, the judge leaned forward. "Go on." What followed was not an argument. It was a presentation. Exhibits introduced one by one. Bank records showing transfers labelled as business expenses. Charts mapping money movement from joint accounts to Daniel's company to Emily's personal accounts. Dates highlighted. Patterns annotated. The judge asked questions, short ones, clarifying ones. Daniel's attorney objected twice, then stopped. Objections require uncertainty. This room had none. The prenup amendment came next. My attorney introduced the digital signature expert's report, then the metadata. Our timestamps, IP addresses, proof that I had been in a recorded meeting across town when the document was allegedly signed. The judge removed his glasses and read the page again. Slowly. Emily shifted in her seat. Daniel leaned forward, whispering urgently to his attorney, who no longer looked comfortable reassuring him. When the judge asked Daniel if he recognized the document, his answer was automatic. "Yes." "And you witnessed the signing?" "Yes." The judge nodded once and turned to the clerk. "Please note the response." That was the moment Daniel realized something was wrong, not emotionally, but structurally. The kind of wrong that doesn't improve with explanation. The recorded call was admitted last. The audio filled the courtroom, tinny and unmistakable. Emily's voice, light and careless, talking about timelines, about winning early, and about how once it's final, none of this matters. I didn't look at her while it played. I looked at the judge, who stopped taking notes entirely and listened. When the recording ended, the room stayed silent longer than it should have. The judge cleared his throat. "This court finds that the prenup amendment is invalid due to forgery," he said. Daniel's attorney stood halfway, then sat back down. Further, the court finds sufficient evidence of marital fraud asset concealment, and coordinated action between the respondent and a third party. He paused, then added, "Now, spouse." Emily's breath caught audibly. It was the first sound she'd made all morning. What followed wasn't dramatic. It was devastating. The house was reclassified as marital property and awarded to me. Funds transferred out were ordered clawed back with penalties. And Daniel's company finances were flagged for further review. A referral for fraud investigation was issued, formally entered into the record. The judge explained each consequence the way someone explains gravity: impersonal, unavoidable. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The court notes, the judge said, that the respondent's subsequent marriage did not shield these actions. It compounded them. He looked directly at Daniel and Emily. By marrying prior to resolution, you exposed yourselves to shared liability. Emily's face drained of colour. Daniel's mouth opened slightly, then closed. They finally looked at each other. Not united, but calculating. The gallery murmured. Family members who had attended the wedding shifted uncomfortably, whispers passing between them as the implications landed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a messy divorce, this was a public finding, a legal one, the kind that follows you into banks, boardrooms, and background checks. I felt no urge to look back at them. The moment wasn't mine to savour. It was theirs to absorb. The judge concluded by setting timelines for compliance and dismissing the parties. The gavel fell, sharp and final. Daniel stood too quickly, knocking his chair back. Emily remained seated for a moment longer, hands gripping the edge of the table as if she needed something solid to hold onto. Their attorneys leaned in, speaking urgently now, no longer soothing, no longer confident. I gathered my papers calmly. My attorney touched my arm once, a quiet confirmation. As I walked toward the exit, I heard my name behind me, not shouted, not desperate, just uncertain. I didn't turn around. Some conversations expire without notice. The hallway outside felt brighter, wider, as if the building itself had exhaled. Outside, the air was cool. I stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, letting the noise of the street reassert itself. Cars passed. People laughed somewhere down the block. Life continued, indifferent to the collapse happening behind me. That was the final twist. Not that they lost, but that the world didn't stop to watch. I got into my car, closed the door, and sat quietly before starting the engine. They had thought the marriage made them untouchable. Instead, it made everything traceable. If you stayed to the end, you already know this wasn't about revenge. It was about patience and proof. If you believe silence can be strategic and consequences matter, subscribe for more daily dose. These stories don't end the way you expect.